Welcome to Stack Sessions, the podcast where software engineering meets business strategy. In today's world, software development has fundamentally changed. AI is changing the game. The technology is different. How code gets written is different. How we check it is different. Even the team structures are different. How things get done and what engineering leadership means is fundamentally different. And we're all figuring out how to get through this together. Stack Sessions is your opportunity to listen and participate with industry leaders on this journey. I'm your host. My name is Jeff Keyes. I'm the field CTO here at AllStacks. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Chris Condo. I've known Chris for quite a long time. He originally wrote the Forrester Wave for value stream management, and I was enthralled in that. In fact, we pivoted our entire business to adopt the term value stream management because we saw that as identity of what we were doing at the time. He spent years evaluating how engineering organizations measure and optimize software delivery. Now he's at Equal Experts, working directly with engineering leaders in the trenches. Here's what's cool. We get to talk to Chris today about okay, with everybody asking how's that AI thing going and how do I measure its impact, would it be good to ask a guy who's been looking at measuring impact of performance and delivery improvements across the board? Let's see where it goes. So let's go. Chris, welcome. Glad to have you today and so excited to be talking about this stuff. And as way of background, is there anything you want to make sure people know about you if they haven't heard your name before? Because if you haven't, you've been living under a rock. That's all I can say.
I wouldn't say that, but thank you, Jeff. It's a real pleasure to be here. And I love your intro because I'm going to go a little bit in the Wayback Machine because some people don't know. They know me as a Forrester analyst and most recently as a client partner here at Equal Experts. But I'm going to go to the Wayback Machine for where the kernel of sort of VSM came from. I was a software engineer at Microsoft for about 13 years. We were developing a product before Office 365. There was a precursor to that called Office Live. And our team was out in Boston and we were developing a lot of the different features for that product. And we had a manager who would all of a sudden said, Condo, you're going to be coming to the quarterly business review meeting. And I'm like, I'm an engineer. You don't need me. I'm just going to be over here making sure my team closes out their stories and gets our sprints done. We're good. Thanks a lot. He's like, nope. You are coming to the business review meeting and you're going to bring with you a deck that tells us everything that's going on in your team, how many check-ins, how long are builds taking, what's going on in production, what's happening. And so I started showing up at these business review meetings, which was the first ones I ever been to in my life. And already been a development, leader for like 25, 26 years. I was really blown away. So what we found out is, first of all, we evaluated our engineering processes and what's going on? What's going good? What are all these metrics that we have? Like, how long is it taking to do the build? How many people are working on features? How many things didn't get completed? Why is the backlog growing and not shrinking? And then we had a bunch of customer facing telemetry metrics, which in the early 2000s, they were kind of rough. It's like, what the log file tell you? And, we had to write a lot of tools ourselves to comb through these things. It was before Splunk and before a lot of these really cool products that'll do all these like distributed tracing for you. We had to write our own freaking distributed tracing systems. And it wasn't like just like megabytes. It was like gigabytes and terabytes of log files coming out of these systems. And we had to pull all these things together. So what we discovered is that we had outages that were caused by people attacking our websites 24/7. We didn't even know it, right? So we had to start writing out, systems to block that. We found out that during certain times there were metrics would go wonky because, of scale issues or performance issues. We found out that what we thought were random 400 errors, it turned out they happened in gigabytes. Like they happened all the time. And it was just like there were certain things that would trigger them. So we really got good at understanding that you have to blend the developer world of how well you're delivering features with how well are they being received. And so there's this whole notion is value being received by our customers, and are we doing a good job delivering that value? On top of all that, Microsoft had its own sort of system for how they would triage bugs. And as an analyst, I would often tell people this and they'd be aghast. And I'd say, we'd ship code all the time that had bugs. And it would basically be a value proposition. do I want to get this new feature out or do I want to fix this backlog of bugs? And oftentimes those bugs would be priority 3 or lower. And we had product managers who really understood the value that was being delivered and that what the customers expected. We had competition in the form of Google. And so moving rapidly and keeping the whole train moving was an imperative. The only time that we would probably go back and fix an issue that we didn't ship is if we knew that it was going to need to be fixed for, say, compliance or governance reasons, or that we knew it was going to come back to bite us eventually. But a lot of times we just would triage them away and they would never come back. Versus what I would see with other companies that when I became an analyst is that bugs never went away. They just sort of grew and grew and grew and grew. And I had clients that say, I got like 10,000 bugs in my backlog. How can I go faster? And I'd say, delete them. Go back 3 months and just remove them. Nobody cares now. They've been there for years. You've been living here forever. So that's my background. I come from Microsoft. I brought that experience into Forrester. And at Forrester, what I discovered is that people just were focusing on the technology. How do I make developers go faster? How do I do CI/CD better? Why aren't we doing DevOps right? And I'd be like, are you delivering value? Are you actually, do customers care what you're delivering? Because maybe your backlog is filled with a bunch of junk. Maybe you don't need all that stuff, and you should be focused on things that deliver value. And from that, and from reading books from Gene Kim, DevOps Handbook, stuff from Mick Kirsten, and thought leaders in the whole software delivery and DevOps space, together, myself and at the time my co-partner Diego Lejudige, we decided to write a report that was called Value Stream Management. It kind of picks up where DevOps and Agile left off, and that really started this whole idea of trying to get engineering leaders to realize that your software delivery lifecycle is a value stream. That there's a product manager, there are stakeholders, there are people that are expecting at the end of the day that value is being delivered. It's not just about closing stories. It's not just about fixing every bug in the backlog. It's really understanding whether or not are you using all of your resources to the greatest capacity to deliver value. And so that was where this whole idea of value stream management got sort of born. It's not brand new, right? Deming wrote about it a long time ago, and the Toyota Way and all those folks put it to good use. We're just trying to apply that to software development. And I would say that it's still a work in progress.
I, you know, surprisingly enough, as an industry, we're still, frankly, not that good at writing software. It's
No.
surprising.
Yeah.
One of the things I would just want to dive right into before we dive into more AI stuff is my quote here that I'm looking at is that VSM, value stream management, was missing its killer use case,
Mm.
but Turing bots fixed that. Are you seeing this? Tell us more, a bit of background on that, because there's a lot of good stuff to unpack in that world.
Yeah, so Diego coined the term Turing bot. The idea was back in the 2 years ago when he coined it, we were looking at Copilot. But what do you know? Things have actually turned into very intelligent looking software technology such as Claude and even Copilot itself and ChatGPT. You can write a whole application by asking it to do something. And you saw a lot of development leaders saying, all right, I'm using Copilot now, or I'm using Claude, I'm using all these things. I should be expecting to see a productivity improvement, right? My
Yes.
engineers
Mhm.
should now be working so much faster. But they would be calling me as an analyst and saying, how do I measure that? Because I just wanted to equip my engineers with the latest tools. And now my CFO and my CTO and my CEO are saying, great, we paid for all these new tools. What's the improvement? I don't see any improvement. I don't see us rapidly advancing. And I think that if people really want to understand what's changed with the introduction of this new technology, they really need to be starting to look at value stream management and the technologies that measure those particular outputs. Whether it's productivity or velocity, like a Dora metric, or is it value delivered? How much of the backlog that was high priority, strategically important, was actually delivered in these particular sprints or during this quarter, right? And
Right.
people are still missing that. They're still focused too much on the little gears that happen inside, and
Yeah.
by doing that, they're missing the big picture. We're supposed to be delivering more value, not necessarily doing the same thing we were doing before, but faster.
Yeah. I remember I looked at one tool's analysis to answer the question of what's the impact of AI. The calculation was, well, we'll look at the lines of code that were generated by that developer before, and
Yeah,
then that developer with AI delivers this many more. So therefore, there's a value I can put in each line of code. They produce this much more, and I'm like, oh my gosh, can you please not? Well, we're on this topic. Let's dive right in. You mentioned a couple good things here, which is people are paying real dollars for these tools. They're not free. In fact, they're not even cheap.
no,
And in many cases, they're a significant investment for every development pipeline, every developer that's there. The cool thing is, according to the latest Dora report, is that individual productivity is up. Awesome. You know what's not up? Actual throughput.
right.
Other things that are up, code instability. Wait, what's going on? I mean, oh my gosh, shouldn't we be much better? In fact, let me tell you a conversation I had just yesterday with my CEO. It's like, oh, we implemented Code Rabbit, to do code reviews and check in on things. Is quality better? I mean, look at the metrics right now. No, right?
Yeah.
The developers love it. It's awesome. The QA team's thinking this is awesome. But so what's happening here? What are we missing?
Well, it could be that what we're doing is allowing engineers to create more code quickly. And so the size of a check-in is becoming much larger than maybe it was in the past. So yes, much larger, right? We have people who are improperly using, I think, some of these tools. And so they might create, let's say, a function and then ask their AI tool to, let's refine that a little bit more. Let's refine it a little bit more. By the fifth or sixth revision, you realize it didn't revise what you did, it just added more stuff to it. And
Yeah.
so left the old code there, but put new code in, right? I think what we're seeing is really an adjustment to this new technology, and in many ways, it's being used improperly. So when that happens, what you get is big fat check-ins that are hard to review. Maybe bugs get slipped in more quickly. And then you're also seeing people who are trying to use AI and getting frustrated with it because they get stuck in these really big, long reviews of whatever the chatbot created. What's interesting about that is that, or the reflection on that might be that maybe the chat interface is a bad interface. Maybe that's not the right way to be using AI at all in the software delivery lifecycle, because it goes back to the fact that like we're just trying to make the same process go faster, but maybe we need a brand new process versus just augmenting the current process. That's the sort of conclusion that we're coming to here at Equal Experts is that while you can certainly help a developer do what they normally do faster, we're not exactly sure that's the right way to approach software development moving forward.
Well, and it's fascinating back to the original point. We look at the entire time that software went through a backlog to ideation to refinement, grooming into by the time it reaches a sprint, that thing's been around for a long time. And
That's
then
right.
all of a sudden we pour these massive amount of metrics and scrutiny onto a development team saying, churn those widgets out faster.
Right.
Is that really the right and then how long does it take once the code's written and
Yeah.
checked in to actually get to production?
Yeah.
And and
It's like looking at the backside of a Swiss watch and where you can see all the gears moving and you wonder, why isn't this little gear moving any faster?
right.
But it can't. It's completely dependent upon all the other gears around it. And so if you wanna make a faster watch, you have to make the whole thing has to be faster, right? And to your point, I think what you reflected to me when you were at Plutora and other products where you worked on VSM tools, people would say, "Oh, we fixed this development problem." Then we found out we had this other part of our value stream that like you said, just trying to get ideas out of a stakeholder, getting them approved, getting them funded, and getting them into the backlog. In fact, I think I interviewed one of your clients about that, and she told us all about how they had this process that was so archaic that they would have to go back to a board of directors once they completed all their work for the year because they got it done much quicker to plead with them, can you please give us more money? And her solution was start talking about instead of funding individual work, fund outcomes, right? Fund improve the customer experience, fund improve distribution, fund whatever it was that was her particular pain point for her organization. And I think That's the way we have to look at software now. We have AI, we have this incredible tool. If we just automate or speed up the things that are already broken, we're just going to create more junk.
So agree.
Stack Sessions is brought to you by AllStacks. Something happened in your code base today that's going to blow up your delivery timeline, and you don't know it yet. The AllStacks intelligence engine connects your project and code data to surface delivery and technical risks before they become a crisis. Begin with answers, end with dashboards. Sign up for early access free through January 2026 at allstacks.com.
Equal experts. You come in, you analyze the situation, you see where there's some deficiencies. They're saying, "Hey, equal experts, help us out." You're like, "Great, we're going to help you with some process. We're going to put some people in." How are you navigating this new structure? What are you saying? If they're in the traditional world and equal experts is coming in, what are some of the common themes that you're saying as you come in?
Well, it's interesting, right? We try to work within the context of the client. We don't have like a big breadth of offerings. We offer software development expertise. Like we lead like a showing by doing type thing where we don't sit and pontificate. We actually sit down and right next to the engineer and we show them, here's how, you'd use this particular technology, whether it be Claude or whatever, to, improve the prompting if that's what you want to do. We usually walk in and try to assess the situation before we do anything because we want to make sure that we understand the client's real needs, we understand what their skill level is and what kind of talent we need to bring into the team. And then we usually start off with a really small pilot because these projects are really kind of tricky, right? They might have already started down this road. They might already have some negative opinions about AI. And so you might have a champion and you might have a bunch of passive aggressive people and you're walking into this situation and you got to figure it out. We try to walk in and just say, we're not here to replace anybody. We're here to help you make you better. We offer a couple of different ways, but one of the ones that we like to walk into is say, let's take a look at a feature that you're trying to build and let's see how we can automate that end to end from what's the value you're trying to create? How do you curate that into a set of work items using AI? How do you then code that using AI? How do you test that using AI? And how would you deploy that using AI? And the whole idea is to use AI throughout the entire life cycle. So you're not just speeding up one little piece and one little slice of the Mobius loop of DevOps. You're taking all of those things that we just talked about and saying, all right, you got a couple of ideas. Let's let's also put in conversations from from your customers. Let's also put in things that maybe come from your issue board. Let's take all of that, shake it up with AI, and then add some product expertise and see how do we generate a curated list of, work items that much quicker than the traditional approach. Let's then start working on that. How do we unleash AI on that? It's almost like doing waterfall all over again. Let's build this really nice backlog that has everything we want, but we get it done within, a day or two rather than months. And then how can we get code to actually get generated from that within a few days? And then how can we get it out? So how can we take something that would be 3 months and shrink it down to a week? That's our goal. So that's what we try to do. Doesn't always work out. Sometimes it's more complex, sometimes there's governance, whatever. And to be honest, we're kind of new at it as well. And every single quarter, it feels like there's a new way to approach these things. There's new technology, new models. So with each customer, we realize there isn't going to be fixed agile model anymore. In the past, we had this model that lived for a decade that we would
Right,
just follow this playbook. This is
right.
really different. And so we walk in and we try to be honest with everybody. Like, this is changing. We know it's changing and we're going to kind of work along and we'll take the technology as it is today and we'll move it forward. So that's kind of how we work. And that's like the AI and the SDLC part. There's also people that just want to use AI everywhere. And so we also are doing work with like agentic operations. For example, we worked with a company that was doing legal intake through email, and we wrote agents to sort of parse the email, figure out what the ask was, package up all of the relevant legal information, and pass it on to the right legal team that could potentially manage that, versus having a team of 3 or 4 people read each email, manually go grab, resources, figure out which team to hand it off to. And so we automated something that took a little team of people to do that would take them like a week to get through the backlog. As soon as it comes in, there are agents that do those things. But guess what? We wrote that a few months ago, and it's probably already needs to be it could probably already be updated with a new model and things like that. That's how fast everything's going. But those kind of processes, like, take all the menial work out of what we're doing,
Mhm.
and let us focus on, if you're a legal team, legal issues. If you're a software team, delivering value.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. I find as I'm writing specs, as I'm writing documents or blogs, I'm now having AI is my ghostwriter. And I'm just having arguments. And by the time I end up with version 20 of whatever I'm working on, okay, it's ready for other people to throw rocks at. I'm actually finding where I'm sharing out, Claude fanatic. So I'm sharing out Claude projects that do the same. You talk about customer feedback. I record, we're Gong users here at Allstacks, and so I'll record calls. And what I'm finding I'm doing now is I'm feeding all of my customer calls in, summarizing those things, asking really, interesting questions like, well, how do you see this impacting my current set of specs? Here's
Yeah.
one. Let's dive in. And it takes a lot of the heavy lifting out of the exact final mile of translation. It's kind of cool. All the summarizations things are amazing. So talk to me about some of the big bottlenecks that you're seeing AI having the biggest impact. And I don't mean coding, but I mean non-coding stuff. As you're working on pipelines and things, like, what are some of the big things? Of course, hey, go get Claude Code, go code this up. But what other kinds of tools are you seeing that you're a big fan of? You don't have to necessarily mention anything by name, but as you're thinking through the rest of the pipeline, talk about where you're seeing these impacts. We talked about shortening this overall cycle.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was at the, QCon event in New York City, last 2 days, and this actually came up a lot. And so from Equal Experts' perspective, there's code generation for sure, but also test generation. As developers, we're always doing happy path testing, but we're not ever doing true negative results testing, or you really beat this piece of code up if you can. And I think that's one thing that you can ask. That's interesting thing about AI is you can say, take an adversarial approach to this conversation or to this code or to this particular application, and test it like you were trying to hack it, right? And AI can sort of take on that persona and start writing code to test your algorithms and whatnot. You can also, I think, have like you said, a conversation. You can't have a conversation with your code, but you can with AI. It can look at the code, and you can ask it questions. Did I use the most optimal algorithms? What do you think the performance is going to be of this? How would you estimate it? And we don't always know. AI isn't perfect, so we need to validate all of the things that come back. But I think writing tests is one thing. Curating the backlog is another. Asking AI, hey, go look at the backlog, look at the code. Is everything that's in the backlog satisfied? And then, like, almost like a traceability. Is there anything in the code that I wasn't supposed to do? Like, maybe there's extra features that nobody asked for and I shouldn't have in there. Those would be kind of cool. You could ask the AI, like, how many of the highest priority items are in this particular release? How many items are low priority? Maybe get a mix for what the value being delivered is. And then the other thing that you can do that I think is most exciting is that after you, and this is the thing that was kind of difficult before, is you could potentially, and I don't know if people are doing this, maybe Allstacks is, you could potentially take your pipeline and compare it with what's in production as far as log files goes, as far as performance goes, and try to combine those two things together to say, is this code, can you detect any performance issues? Are there unmet, like, features or usability issues that are going on that I can't see, but are in the log file, like needles in the haystack that maybe we should be looking for? Because like I said in the past, at Microsoft, we'd be going through log files and we think they were needles in a haystack, and it turned out we had a whole haystack of needles. And so we just didn't see them. Um, but AI can find those things, right? And so, So I think correlating the actual value delivered with what's in the pipeline and maybe trying to do like a whole 360. All right, well, based on what's in production now, based on what the performance of the log files is, and based on what's in the backlog, does this look like the right mix of things that we should be working on, or should we reprioritize? I feel like there's a lot of potential for AI to go beyond doing our manual work and doing things that are really hard to do that aren't in anybody's manual work right now, but they'd be cool to do is from an analytical perspective. But I certainly think if you expand out on both sides of the developer, all the way up to business stakeholders, what should I be working on? What should we be funding? Down to release. Is this a stable release? Is this going to go out the door and break, or is it going to be okay? AI can help us in a lot of cool ways, I think.
I love it. Let's talk about the business side of this for a minute. People are investing into AI in big ways. There's more pressure, as you mentioned. What am I getting for my money? You talked about looking at outcomes and where there's going. I have a ton of customers, and they ask a very similar question. In essence, they start by saying, we're evaluating Anthropic versus OpenAI versus Cursor, yada, yada. And we're trying to figure out which one's best for our organization. We're getting ready to write a really big check. And then they ask, how do we know which one?
Yeah.
And and my response is, I don't think that's the right question. So I'll ask you what I think is the right question, which is, what's the beginner's guide to getting started with AI? And how should we look at it from an investment point of view? How do we think about its effectiveness as we get going forward with our customers and everybody in the industry who's looking at answering the same question? How do we evaluate this, knowing that we're spending real money here?
Well, first of all, I agree with you that they're kind of asking almost the wrong question. They're trying to find out at a moment in time which of those models is going to give them maybe the highest accuracy of correct answers when they use a chatbot to give them code. What they really should be thinking about is how are we going to re-engineer our organization to utilize the full capacity of AI end to end. And so I feel like they should be thinking about a big picture of what does an AI native software delivery lifecycle look like? Now, once they get started with that and start going down that road, which with whatever tool they have right now, like, let's say they already have Copilot because they have a Microsoft license. A lot of people do. A lot of people use those tools. Or maybe they're on Google Suite and they get a deal on Gemini, whatever. Start with what you got and try to think about how do you reimagine the whole process with AI all the way throughout. Once you do that, and once you think about all of those different layers, what you might discover is that there isn't one single answer to which of these products we need. You might find that there are some models that are better or some products that are better on the business side of refining requirements, reading your data, understanding what's going on in the customer ecosystem. Then you might find out there are other tools that are better at coding, taking the inputs that get generated by AI into your backlog or into your, whatever system you're using, taking that and turning it into code. And there might be other systems that are more connected to the infrastructure that are better at deploying that code in a more reliable way.
Right.
So you might actually need multiple different products to get where you really want to be, which is we want to refine our backlog as quickly as possible, get it ready for AI to take. Then we want AI to actually generate all the code and deploy it in the safest possible way that mitigates any particular risk or downtime so that we make sure that we're actually delivering value each and every time as quickly as possible. Engineers are required for all of those steps. They just need to be doing different things. Instead of them doing the work, they're actually managing all these agents to do the work for them. And so it's a different way of looking at the world. It's a different way of doing software delivery. If they're not looking at it that way, they're really just trying to make a hamster go faster on a hamster wheel, in the middle of a giant habitat trail that's not going anywhere.
You're connecting a tractor up to a horse and donkey trying to
Yeah,
plow, and you're like,
yeah,
wait, that's not quite the right model.
right.
Well, and double click on that one more. What is the process of reimagining that new structure and model?
First of all, what's interesting is that a lot of companies are given an imperative or an initiative, go figure out how to use AI. And what they do is they say, all right, we're going to equip everybody with Copilot. And then we just talked about some of the perils of that. And then a year later, they're not really much further along in their adoption. They haven't really proved that they've delivered much code. And the initiative could almost die on the vine. Like this has been worthless, right? And then what do? They go and they try to find other ways to accelerate and get that value. I kind of feel like they should just really reimagine, what if we had AI at every step? How would our workers interact with AI to make sure that they're guiding them? So if you everyone talks about like AI is like a junior developer. Somebody at the QCon uh, show posted this very interesting diagram about like people like, would you give your drunken best friend access to all of your code and your entire enterprise system? Then why are you doing it with AI, right? So, anyways, because it's not a person. It needs direction, it needs, directions, it needs, control, needs review, but it works so much faster than people do. So, like, what we need are to understand, like, how does a product manager interact with AI to make sure that the backlog is getting curated as quickly as possible? How do the business stakeholders who are generating the ideas to begin with and work with marketing to make sure that, they're getting all these things all curated? How do engineers manage their fleet of, agents? How are they gonna direct them and make sure that they're doing the right thing? And so you kind of really have to investigate that whole top layer of what it means to be AI native across the board, and then start digging in. You need to do your homework. You need to start doing some pilots. You need to really be looking at what some of the innovators are doing in this space, like Meta and Google and whatnot. They're going at light speed. You don't have to go at light speed, but you do have to understand what they're doing because that's the future of software engineering. If all you're trying to do is just make developers go faster, you're not really fixing the process and you're not really getting the full advantage of AI.
Yeah.
So
I it
that's my feeling.
I love it. We probably need a whole session just on that topic. The interesting I remember, there was a LinkedIn post that I read about LinkedIn changing the development structure where it's one product manager, one developer. How much can you guys deliver in a short period of time?
Yeah,
And go get that value. Chris, we've run us out of time.
yeah.
I love our discussions. As always, if people are interested in talking to you, what is the best way?
You could just email me, chris.condo@equalexperts.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I think it's Christopher Condo on LinkedIn. Yeah, any which way you want. We're open to it.
That's fantastic. Thanks again. This has been another session of our Stack sessions. I love this content. We're going to continue to talk about this new world of software delivery and development and the whole model. If you need tooling to help you in your journey to understand the outputs and the effectiveness of your teams, that's what we do at Allstacks. We are an agentic engineering operations team sitting on top of your software development processes. We work alongside your TPMs and engineering leadership to help you understand. You want to talk to your data, get interesting answers, come to Allstacks. With that, until next time, thanks again, Chris.
My pleasure, Jeff. Thank you so much for inviting me.